Alright, hello everyone. My name is Disc, and in this video we have another viewer lesson coming to us from Area 52. His name is Caprice Sun, and we are running Mindbender in a Brackenhide Hollow 20. For the week we are Incorporeal, Sanguine, and Fortified. So before we get into the video, I wanted to thank everyone again who has vouched for me on Medify.gg. It was early last week that I became an official partner. So I'm really excited for that. I love discipline. I love teaching discipline. And I think this will be a really great outlet for me to do more of all of that. So if you've not checked out my page yet, please go on over and check it out. I have quite a few different tiered prices for things that I offer. And yeah, go check it out. So here we have your talents for this key. I think I want to talk about talents, then we're going to look at your meters, and then we're going to talk about some UI improvements, and then we'll go into the gameplay. So off the top here, I think your talents on both sides are a little bit whack, and I think this is actually holding you back in a lot of ways you might not realize. So if we can tweak some things, I think you'll have more fun, and I think you'll end up getting more output from your tune. So let's start on the priest side and just go straight down. So we have improved purify. We definitely need that for Brackenhide Hollow. And then this area is where you've spent some points that I think you could reconcile and put them somewhere else. I don't think Phantasm is needed for Brackenhide Hollow. And then when it comes to Tendrils and Dominate Mind, I would definitely try and only put 1 point here. And being that we are an Incorporeal week, Dominate Mind is kind of the route you've gone. So I might consider dropping Tendrils just to gain an extra point. And then over here, I think this is kind of an error too for Brackenhide Hollow. This is a dungeon where we don't need any Mass Dispel. And what it looks like is you've spent this point maybe so that you could take inspiration. But I don't think this is that viable of a point, especially when you're sacrificing Nova and Rhapsody. So even though you are running Mindbender, I definitely think you still need to take these points. Right now in our spellbook, this is probably one of the most powerful spells that we have, and there's nothing that would justify in my mind dropping those. And then you take the Sanguine Teachings. I think that's fine. Personally, I still do Vampiric Embrace, but that's user's choice. And then a little bit further down, so you've avoided extra bottom tier points. And when you're running Mindbender, I definitely think this Essence Devourer is a non-negotiable, especially if you're not taking Vampiric Embrace. So, and here's another point you could reconcile. I don't think putting a point into the damage reduction and fade is worth it, especially at a 20. So I think you could reconcile this point. You can reconcile your Phantasm, reconcile your Tendrils, and then maybe even build out your Crystalline Reflection a little bit more, and definitely take the Essence Devourer, and definitely take Holy Nova. I think if you, as you're listening to my video, maybe on your second monitor or whatever, if you have my Brackenhide Hollow up from last week, and maybe you could track along, like as I reference things, you could look at how I'm doing it. I think that might be helpful for you. And then over on the Discipline side, this is almost there, but a little bit whack as well. So down in the expiation area, we are going to look at your DPS meters next, but you definitely do not want 1 of 2 here. You want 2 of 2. And I think really all you would need to do to correct this is take Painful Punishment and put it down here. I think Painful Punishment is great. It's kind of like a quality of life thing. If it were base value, I would love it, but we can't really sacrifice a point on it, especially our expiation point. And the main reason for that is our Shadow Covenant is our biggest window for DPS and HPS. Not only is it shadow damage, it is also a heal. So it's just such a valuable spell for us, and it gets so much value out of our Shadow Covenant. We really don't want to gimp ourselves only with 1 here, and that is kind of just my opinion on that. But then other than that 1 point, I think you are fine over here on the disc side. So now let's quickly go through your meters. And first up, let's look at your healing. There's not too much going on here, and this is a pretty good spread for you. If you notice, your atonement is on top. That is our biggest driver as a disc priest, and a lot of these things I've talked to you already about this morning, but just for the sake of the video, I wanted to throw it in here too. So when I see atonement on top like this, which is correct, what that makes me think is, what drives my atonement? It's not flash heals, it's not radiance, it's not pain sup, it's all of my attacks. So that is why I'm going to splash it up here too. That's why I've designed my combat HUD in such a way that all of my attack spells are biggest and most prominent. We are going to be playing these way more than we're playing anything else, and they're most important. And since they're coming on and off cooldown so frequently, I've kind of made them bigger. I've grouped them, and this is really going to help drive your atonement heals when you can see your atonement attacks grouped and consolidated and like intentionally a little bit bigger than the rest of your spells. So now over to the DPS. This is where we can see things have fallen off a little bit. And if we look at your overall DPS for this dungeon, you're right under 50k, and you should be closer to 70k, so you're missing quite a bit of value here. But we're still doing good here. So between our top 2 or top 3, you always want to see a big jump like this before we get down to our shadow spells. So the big gap you have between Purge and Death is spot on, but then beyond that is where things are a little bit out of whack. And mainly it has to do with your Mind Blast is the biggest problem here. So I noticed when I watch your video, you're not playing it enough. I think you're missing Mind Blasts quite often. And I also think quite often your Mind Blast is resting at a 2-stack, which I equate to loss. When it comes to your shadow spells in your Shadow Covenant, your Mind Blast should be first, your Dark Reprimand should be second, your Death should be third, and your Expiation should be fourth. And you'll see here your Expiation is way down at the bottom, and I think that's mainly because you dropped that talent point, but it should definitely be a really strong contender underneath your Shadow Word Death. And again, that's also a huge chunk of healing that you're missing. And I think your Expiation is also low here because you're not playing your Mind Blast optimally, so there's a couple areas that caused your Expiation to be so low. But if you pull up my Brackenhide Hollow from last week and look where my Expiation falls, you'll see how strong it is for us because it's a shadow spell. So we definitely want to take that extra point in Expiation. And I think if you give more focus to your Mind Blast, a lot of this will kind of work itself out naturally. And so now this is a little bit trickier of an area where I want to talk about, but it's about your rotation. And a lot of this is going to change, but I still think this is valuable to think about from like a theory perspective. But your rotation is quite a bit off. So first off, we have to ramp properly going into Shadow Covenant. And the main thing you're missing is an atonement ramp. So we're expecting our Mindbender to be around 20 seconds. And a long atonement is 15. So in the perfect world, we can ramp a full party of atonements, long atonements, and then Shadow Covenant. And then when we do that, we now have the freedom to just DPS. And we've already highlighted that is our most valuable way to heal through atonements. And then, so we set ourselves up with long atonements. We're expecting them to start falling off mid Shadow Covenant. And that's where you work in 1 Radiance. And that is kind of like the ideal ramp. And what I see you doing a lot of times is you go into your Shadow Covenant and the first thing you do is Radiance. And that is a problem for a couple reasons. But first, let's talk about your opener. So let's say you had an ideal atonement ramp and you're going into your Shadow Covenant. What I refer to as your opener is a trio of spells. It's our Schism, Shadow Covenant, and Mindbender. That's our opener, and you're playing those in the wrong order. So what you're doing, it kind of varied from pull to pull, and it always will. But I see what you're doing quite often is you'll schism Mindbender then Shadow Covenant, and that just opens the door for missing torment spells. So our Mindbender is a very, very finite window and very, very valuable. We want to put him last as our opener. So putting something like Shadow Covenant after the Mindbender, I kind of consider it a dead global, and you're wasting time. So, and then another thing is, being that Mindbender is so finite and so valuable, it wasn't too long ago that I realized this, thanks to one of my viewers, but one thing you're doing great is you're getting 2 Dark Reprimands that are both procs. And I think that's the biggest thing to lose, and I think you're actually getting those quite consistently. However, you don't need both of those after your Mindbender. So if you look at the sequence here, we will Schism, Shadow Covenant, then drop our first Dark Reprimand proc, and then our Mindbender. So being that Mindbender is so finite, we can take 1 Dark Reprimand out of his window, and we definitely don't want our Shadow Covenant cast in his window either. So if your first sequence of 3 is Schism, Shadow Covenant, then Dark Reprimand, you're really freeing up your Mindbender for the more important spells of Mind Blast and Death. And then also quickly, while we're on the subject, if you reference my combat HUD, you'll also notice that the Mindbender icon, Mind Blast, and Shadower Death are all grouped because of the synergy of those 3 spells. Right now, when I look at your bars, your attack spells, not only are they scattered, your torment spells aren't even together. So from my point of view, when we're trying to help ourselves play our spells optimally, things like our Mindbender icon, our Mind Blast and Death really should be grouped. And you'll see if you look at my combat HUD here, I have all 3 of those grouped up, and that's very intentional so that I don't have to move my eyes around too much to monitor these 3 values. And I think that'll really help you. So again, you might want to watch this over. I hope I said it clearly, but with our Mindbender window at the moment, we really want to pull 1 of our penance in front of the Mindbender, and we definitely want our Shadow Covenant cast before the Mindbender as well. So as soon as the Mindbender is out, we have 1 main priority, and that is to pump our torment spells. And then that's that. And then I'm going to try and keep it as quick here as possible, but I'm going to flash a screenshot of your UI in combat. And I'm going to try and talk about this generally, but when it comes to a UI, I think the more screen space you can see, the better you'll play. And I think that's a direct correlation. So optimally, like, we'd have nothing on the screen, but that's impractical. There are things we have to track. But I think you have too much information on your screen, and I think if you can whittle that down, you'll be a more powerful disc player. And something to consider is, when you're building your UI, is kind of understanding where valuable screen space is and where non-valuable screen spaces. So the closer to center where your tune is, that is very, very valuable. You really only want things towards center that pertain to combat, and then things that don't pertain to combat are what you want to push as far away as possible. So something like your meters, I think definitely could go in a corner, and conversely, you want your action bars more towards center. And then also with your UI, I think you have a lot more showing than is necessary. And then things you do need showing, you don't have up. So we kind of have this imbalance right now where you're not seeing what you need to see, but you are seeing a lot of what you don't need to see. So we kind of need to tweak that a little bit and balance it out a little bit more. But if you want to keep your meters right where they are, I think that's fine. I think you could definitely make them a little smaller because there's a lot of open space below your party of 5. And then I definitely think the opacity, you could make that a little bit less so it's not as black, and in a way that kind of opens up your screen space as well. And then also with all of your UI elements, you should collapse those to the edge. And then with your action bars, if you wanted to leave them exactly how they are and not kind of adopt my action bar HUD, even if you wanted to leave them exactly where they are, I think you could maybe drop their scale a little bit, make them a little bit smaller. They're eating up a lot of space. And then food for thought, try hiding spells like on a hidden bar that you don't need to see the cooldown of. And that's one really easy way to open up screen space. Something like Flash Heal and Renew, you don't necessarily need to see those on your screen. Something like Mass Res, something like Fortitude, things like that you can put on a hidden bar, and that's a really easy way to open up screen space. And then when it comes to your nameplates, I can be really picky about this, but I draw a hard line in the sand and only allow information on my screen that I need. And I guess it's, kind of like, where do you draw that line? What do you need and what do you not need? And when it comes to nameplates, all I think we need from nameplates is a system to help us track where our focus target is. So with my KUI nameplates, I use a color-coded system, and then I use it to track my dot. That is it. Not counting Schism, we're just tracking our dot. And then I also use it to help me see execute range. And that is really, I think, all you need from nameplates. And right now, if we look at your nameplates, they're giving us about, I would estimate about 20 times more information than you need. And I think, no matter how good you are, no matter how fast your brain works, we all can benefit from having less on our screen. And I think minimizing the information on your nameplates would really do you a lot of good. There's probably about 10 times as many numbers on your screen. So like I'll only show a percentage. That's it. And I have no decimal points. So it's just a percentage. It's 2 numbers for the most part. I don't think you need to show the value, the health value. I don't think you need to show the star for the elites. So, like when everything has a star, you might as well have none of them with a star. And then when it comes to cleaning up your UI, reducing redundancies is always something to look out for. And if we look at your dot, your Purge the Wicked, you have the timer of the dot twice. So that's a clear redundancy that you can eliminate. You also have like this little paw print that I'm not sure what that is, but there's so much on here that you could take off, and it's really overloading that section of your screen when you have large groups. It's almost so flooded with information that I can't see anything. And really, to maximize our output and to maximize our spells, I really only need to be tracking my dot on my nameplate. I don't really need to see other people's debuffs. I think very selective. I can't even think of a place where I would want to see someone else's debuffs. Or like, I noticed your nameplates will show if a mob is standing in Sanguine. So my argument there is, as a priest, there's nothing in our book that we can do to get a mob out of Sanguine. Therefore, it's not that valuable for me to see if they have that debuff on them or that buff. So it's just little things like that. I think we could reduce the amount of information on your screen, and then what we very intentionally leave behind becomes more potent. And I think that strengthens you as a WoW player. And then, so I preach it in all my videos, but your bigwigs, so they're kind of overlapping your minimap. I think you could move them. And then I think you also need to spend, it might take you 30 minutes or so, but go through each page of bigwigs and whittle it down to only tracking bar timers for attacks that have to do with timing your spells. And as a disc priest, we have to be preemptive. So if we don't see timers, we can't line our spells up correctly. But then, let's say you're on a boss where there's one attack where you have to line your Shadow Covenant up, but you have 10 bars that you're tracking. Like, my logic is, I have to first find which bar, in that stack of bar, which one is my heal. It takes me out of combat if I'm having to discern which bar pertains to my heal. And that's why I just like to have one bar and just know it's to time my heal. And I think if you reduce your bigwigs, I think that'll help you in the long run. And I think that's good practice to get in now while you know the dungeons, because as soon as our dungeons flip over, it might be good information for you just to kind of like know how to do. And then you can do that to the new dungeons once we get there. And then I think we can just go ahead and clip over to the key. But one thing I did want to note before we get there, you didn't play your barrier once. So that's just one really clear area where we can improve. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, so here we go. I thought to kind of format this as a stop and go again. So I have like control and I can pause and talk. But again, I'll say you're doing a lot right here. So if I had to guess, I think your parse is around 85 or 90%. So we're doing a lot right. But to squeeze out that last 10% of our spec actually takes more work than the rest of it. So I think you're on the right track. But to get that last little bump of output, I think it'll take quite a bit of work. But I hope I can at least highlight areas where I think you need improvement, so you at least like maybe have an idea from someone else's perspective of where your deficits are. So let's go ahead and watch this. I'm going to try and mainly call out your torments, and we're going to try and highlight when you're missing torments. Quickly, I want to pause. I'm going to flash a screenshot here. So I think you've seen my videos, so you know what I'm talking about. But when I mentioned your nameplates, one of the items I said is we need a system to help us track our focus targets. So in my nameplate system, I have them color coded. The darker the red, that means they have the more health, the most health. And in a pack like this, the War Scourge has the most health by a long shot. And you'll see in my screenshot, they're very clearly standing out as a darker red. And that, I think, is probably the best way to kind of guide your targeting, is if you just have a color-coded system rather than all of them being blue and you have to read them to find the War Scourge. I just think a color-coding system makes it a little bit easier. Yeah. So you are on the War Scourge. That is good. And there was 1 torment, 2 torments, 3. 4, 5. Okay, you got 5. So we did talk about this already, kind of off the books. But when you're in your Shadow Covenant window, it is very important to just DPS. And the best way you can do that is if you set your group up with long atonements before you go into Shadow Covenant. Therefore, you kind of have the freedom at the start of your window to DPS. And then we're going to expect midway through our window that our atonements will dwindle. And that's where we allow 1 global to reatone with our radiance. And then we just keep DPSing. And then also at the top of the video, I want to say, when it comes to torments at the moment, 9 is the maximum you can get. And that's with a haste window and 4 executes. 8 is a lot more common, where you get all of your Mind Blasts, all 4 Mind Blasts, and then 4 executes. 7, I'd probably say, is the most common, and that's like the baseline where I would say you want to hit. That is only with 1 execute resets, but all 4 Mind Blasts. And if you're getting 6 or less, you're missing a lot of value. And on this Mindbender window, you only got 5. And I think part of that is due to the fact that your rotation is a little bit off, which you've already highlighted and talked about. So I think you understand areas where you can tweak that. Okay, good DM. Okay, so we should be fiending for this ramp, getting dots out, getting atonements out, and ramping our harsh discipline. Okay, I'm going to pause real quick. So if you notice, there's something wrong that just happened, and you put your schism on a claw fighter. They are by far they're a middle tier mob for this type of pull. They are not the biggest threat. We do have a War Scourge in the group, and that is where your Long Schism should have gone. Long Schism is great for single target damage, and you need to put it on the right target. I would say it's a very black and white area if it's the right target or the wrong target, and this is the wrong target. And again, if you had a color-coded system, it'd be very easy to tell at a glance where the War Scourge is. And right now, you don't really have a system for that. I wasn't counting your torments. Whoops. Okay, so coming out of your Shadow Covenant, usually the first thing I do is Fiend to put dots back up. Looks like you have a couple, but you could definitely have more. Okay, good reaction time. That was good on the Incorporeal. Okay, our Mindbender's back up. I think this was kind of just a long pull in general, but whenever your Mindbender is down, your one job is to get him back available by casting your basic attack spells. But that one was fine. It's more important for bosses. I think 2 rounds of Mindbender in a trash pull is not that common. Usually you're only going to get 1 Shadow Covenant per trash pull, but this one is just lingering. And yeah, the War Scourge here got healed up by Sanguine, so not much the group could have done there. Well, not much you could have done. But your Long Schism definitely should have been on the War Scourge. And now quickly, while we only have 1 nameplate here. So notice your dot duration. You have 2 counters. So that's like double the amount of information that you need. Also that bear icon, I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's coming from your party. I don't think there's really any reason to track that. I think with your nameplates, you only need to track your own dot and then potentially party CC. And then when it comes to the health value, whereas I'd only have 2 numbers, so mine would say 22%. You have 3 digits for the percent and you have 3 digits and a letter for the value and parentheses. It's just like, what is that? Like 5 or 6 times as many numbers on your screen at any given moment. And when you have a group of 15 mobs like we just had, it's just a huge flood of information. And you would do a lot better if you could condense that. And then also like the level of the mob, you don't need to show that. You don't need to show that little star icon. There's so many things you can take off here. And as soon as you simplify your UI, I really think it directly correlates and you'll do better. And then, sorry I keep pausing, but there are things that come up. So with my nameplates, so when you hit execute range, your nameplates get this little bar that shows up. To me, I can't really see that. And I definitely cannot see it as well. Like to the converse of that with my bar system, my bars will change colors. So like mine go from red to white, but maybe if you just like blue, that's fine. So if they went blue to white, it is a lot easier to see when someone switches into execute range with a color shift. It's just the simple facts. You can see it better than this little bar. And since you're playing Mindbender and our execute ranges are so important, being able to see when someone crosses that threshold clearly is your biggest friend. And right now, I just don't think your system for tracking executes is the best. I think you should try my KUI. And then also there, I saw on the cast bar, it showed where the cast was going. I don't think that's nearly as important. If you want to see where the cast is going, I've already recommended to you try the targeted casts weak aura. I think it is... Oh, your schism's on the wrong target here again. So the person a cast is going on is important information, but seeing it on the nameplate doesn't really do much for you. So there are a handful of casts that you want to get ahead of, and you want to be able to see whom is targeted, but showing that on your bars is better than on your nameplates. It's also just flooding your nameplates with more information. It also looks like your cast bar has a seconds counter with tenths displayed. Again, we just have so many extra numbers on the screen that aren't really that important. Yeah, and I also just saw on your own cast bar you have seconds with a tenth displayed. I really just don't think you need that. I would call it a redundancy because, like we know, the left side of your cast bar is 0%, the right side is 100. We don't need to see the seconds displayed to the 100th or 10th or whatever it is. We can see it well enough just with a system of, left to right. We can estimate. And I think what it boils down to is not only, like, do we have an extra number? All these tenths and hundredths, they're flashing at you. So you have all these things on your screen flashing, and it just serves to be a distractor. Less is more. We need way less numbers on the screen. Okay, so let's see.
3, 2, 1.
There's your Shadow Covenant. Let's try and count. 1 torment, 2 torments, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you got 5 of 7. Not enough.
Our paths shall cross.
Make thieves. Kill them. Ruin them. Destroy them.
See how you do here. So we should be fiending for a ramp, getting a handful of dots out, getting long atonements in group, and ramping harsh discipline. Let's see, here we go. 1 torment, 2 torment, 3,
3, 2,
4,
1.
5, 6, 7. Okay, so that was, I think, the first Mindbender where you hit your baseline of at least 7, so that was good. Except your Schism was on the wrong target again. It was not on the War Scourge. Schisming the War Scourge, that is perfect. You're in your Mindbender.
2, 1.
Okay, it looks like you flat out missed a couple of your torments, but also if you replay that, I think your Mindbender died, so someone hit him. Happens sometimes. Yeah, I would really like you to at least experiment or test my nameplates. I think they're a lot cleaner. And again, I think the cleaner your UI, the better you'll do. You have a lot more information here than you need. And it's really important to minimize that. Okay, we're ramping. Here goes our window.
3, 2, 1.
You're on the War Scourge, so that is perfect. And I think now would be a perfect time to go ahead and talk about this. So it might be hard to point out. Maybe I can point it out later. But you are not trying to maximize radiance. And I've seen this in other lessons I've taught. I'm really honestly curious if anyone can chime in here, Caprice Sun or anyone else even. Is it recommended somewhere, or is there a website that is telling you to use radiance at player only? Because I've seen my other students do this where they have a macro for radiance at player and they never are trying to maximize it. And yeah, doing it at player, I would say probably only 5% of the time you're going to be maximizing it that way. You would probably have better luck maximizing it just picking someone at random, but doing it at player is just a really, really bad idea. And I think now like right now, is the perfect time to try and break that habit. It is a spell you want to direct at an ally, and there is a correct and a wrong ally in the field. So the only spell that I think is fine to default to at player is Shadow Covenant, because it is a minor heal, and more times than not, I just want to press that button and enter Shadow Covenant, and doing that at player is the best way to do it. The bulk of Shadow Covenant's healing is not from the cast itself, but everything else. But when it comes to Radiance, I call it a short range heal. So everything in our book, except for Radiance and Shadow Covenant, is 40 yards. Radiance is 30. So let's say you're standing max distance from the mobs and your tank. If you Radiance yourself always, you're never going to be hitting the tank. Or like conversely, if you Radiance the tank, you're going to miss yourself. So a lot of times you have to Radiance a DPS. It really just varies pull to pull and depending on where everyone's standing. But doing an at player Radiance is a horrible idea because literally more times than not, you're going to miss the party. And I think it's fair game to say, well, what is a maximized Radiance? And it's pretty clear. It's pretty cut and dry. A maximized Radiance hits everyone in the party, all 5 party members. And the only way you can do that is by using party nameplates. So that is one of the things I mentioned where I said you have, I think, too much on your screen that you don't need, and then you don't have things on the screen that you do need. So the only way to maximize Radiance is with party nameplates and picking your ally that's kind of in the middle of the cluster, they would call it. So right now, you're not trying to maximize it, and I'm not sure maybe if you've even thought about what maximizing Radiance looks like, but you want to hit your ally that's in the middle of the group. That way it hits the entire party. And I don't know any other way to do that than with party nameplates, and we'll try and talk about that later if you when you miss. I do like your Omni CD and your bars modeled after mine. So with Omni CD, I see so many people track so many spells, and it's just one of those things like I keep talking about. It's more information on your screen that you need. It just distracts you from seeing what's important. And in all honesty, I think these people that track like 10 spells per ally, they're not looking at that. They're not looking at that. So I don't see any reason to have it on the screen. I think a lot of people, when it comes to UI, they have this idea that more is more, and they just flood their screen with everything thinking it's like benefiting them, and it's just really not. But yeah, I do like your Omni CD with 1 spell per ally, and we're using that add-on to help maximize PI. Okay, so boss time. Opening with Rapture, that is perfect. I would like to see a bar timer for the duration of Rapture. If you notice any of mine, I think showing a little bar timer that like goes top to bottom next to your bars really helps me keep an eye on the duration. You didn't need every single cast of Rapture there, but sometimes you do, and I think just seeing the timer of it or the duration is helpful. So I'd have to replay this, but we can just talk about it in hindsight. So right there, the only thing you could have done better is right as the totem spawns, penance the boss, and it will spread a dot to the totem, helping free you just a little bit quicker. But I'm tempted to think, let's see how I handle this. I'm tempted to think your first schism might have been on the wrong target. I'm not sure. It looks like your group has a split focus target here. It looks like everyone was on the caster first, but I think you might have schismed the Gashtooth guy first. So just good practice when it comes to this boss before you start a key is to just ask the group and make sure everyone's on the same page, so that everyone focuses the same target. And I think being on a 20 you managed even without that type of coordination. Also there on the second gash tooth, that might have been a great place for barrier. Yeah, with bigwigs, I would really only be tracking the gash tooth frenzy and tracking maybe the spawn of that totem to help time my penance.
3,
And if you bring those bars a little closer to the center, it will help you preemptively lay that barrier to mitigate the front end damage of that attack.
watch your step.
Okay, we're in Shadow Covenant. You definitely missed an execute there. I'm sorry, a Shadow Word Death. So we already talked about this over Discord, but Shadow Word Death is almost too long to fit more than one in Shadow Covenant, but it's actually just short enough of a cooldown that you can.
3,
So it's really important
1.
at the top of your Shadow Covenant window. The first spell you want to cast is Mind Blast, and the second is Death. And it's really important to put both of those on cooldown early so that you get them again. And I think what happened right there
Watch your step.
is you did not cast your Death early in your window, and it came available right as your Mindbender was despawning, and you missed a freebie.
Watch your step. 3, 2, 1.
You know, I think what would be better for us here is if I just skip forward a little. I think all of this, what's happening next, kind of might just cover the same things we've already talked about. But here's a good example. If you look at your nameplate area, honestly, can you discern any of that information? It is just so cluttered and so full of information. I see the evoker's dots. I see the icon of the cast. Like, all of these type things are unnecessary. I definitely think dropping the cast, or like the spell cast icon, that's a good idea. You don't need to track anyone's dots but your own, and that's just my opinion on it. We can delete the 70, the level, so see how many numbers are here that we don't need. If I'm trying to see where my dots are and maximize my dots, get my dots out, this almost impairs me, you know what I mean? So that's really all that matters in a group like this, is dot management, and it is such an important task that it's worth having your nameplates only show the dot, and that's to kind of like help you maximize that. Okay, so let's skip forward to, I think this is all kind of the same stuff here. Yeah, and again, here's, I think we saw this before, like watching they all stack up. So like, there's just so much here. I would call it just like overloaded. It is too cluttered with information that if I'm trying to see who has a dot and who doesn't have a dot, it's actually really hard for me to like pick out. Yeah, you could do a lot better with your nameplates. I think you should get my KUI. We're going forward, we're going forward. I think we can stop at the boss. Okay. So with bigwigs, I would say we really only need to track the decay spray, and that is the add spawn. I don't really think this boss does much except those adds. And if you're going for that parse, it's really important to try and line your spells up with the add spawns, like your star and your mindbender. Other than that, you really just want to play mindbender on cooldown. Okay, the ads popped off there. I would say that was a missed fear opportunity. So whenever those ads are out,
3,
I try and let the group handle the interrupt, but I definitely like to put myself in melee as the backup. with Fear Bomb. Okay, someone else got that there. Okay, we're pumping. Mindbender's out. Yeah, and you're really good with your 2 Dark Reprimands that are procced. But again, it's the order of spells. One of those Dark Reprimands should come out in front. Okay, that was a really good fear. Interrupted those attacks. Oh, and also, I think you have the glyph that turns all of your penance purple. I think it might be worth getting one of those whatever dusts and remove that glyph. I actually think it's valuable to see when your penance is just a holy penance and you miss a Dark Reprimand. And I could be wrong, but I think you have that glyph on, and I just think it's valuable to see if it's holy or shadow.
3, 2,
So it looks like also with bigwigs, so you have all these things that are called messages. You don't need that. It is just clutter on your screen, and the big problem I have with them is they usually land. Like, you could move it, but by default, like, I think you should just turn them off. But see where they're landing? They're landing on top of your combat, like right on top of your nameplates, which are already cluttered. So we're just adding more to this area. I can promise you're not reading them. At this point, you just know how the fights work. You're not reading this, but you're still allowing it screen space. So just turn it off. You don't need it. You're not reading it. It's not doing anything to help you. It's just cluttering up, an already cluttered part of your screen. Here come some ads. Whoops. Okay, moving on. Yeah, definitely party nameplates. We need to start getting you in a habit of practicing giving radiance to the correct person.
shockwave,
So like right here, if I were to pause. Hard to say, but let's just, for argument's sake, you are 40 yards from Stink Breath and Boss. Your at player radiance that you have, you don't have the ability to direct it anywhere. Your at player radiance will not hit the tank ever, because it's only 30-yard range. What you need to do is radiance this person. And just looking at this, I can tell it's a mage because of the frost graphics. But if you could see his nameplate bar and see that it's blue, that would very easily guide you to the blue bar, health bar, to radiance him. So like that's what you need to think about. And a lot of times you do just have to radiance someone, and you don't have the time or space to think. Usually I might default to myself, or I'll default to the tank, or maybe default to the person who's lowest health, things like that. But in a single target fight like this, where you have a little bit of leeway to kind of play your cards right, you need to look who's in the middle of your group, and that's who gets your radiance. Yeah, like right there, I think we saw your paladin was grayed out because he was out of range.
1,
That is exactly why you would want to radiance. Wait, let me back it up. What just happened here? Did you radiance?
shockwave,
I don't think you radiance. You just cast some atonements. Yeah, you're just atoning.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, it's in your defense, maximizing radiance wasn't ever something I really even thought about until about a month ago. So I've been playing Disc for a long time, and it never occurred to me. I actually don't even think I knew that it was a short range heal. And it dawned on me that, like, I hate it when I radiance and it misses the full party. And that's when I kind of like investigated and learned that it was short range heal. And I thought, shit, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. And yeah, you really want to hit the person in the middle of your party cluster. You cannot cast it randomly, and you shouldn't be casting it only on yourself. And I think it's like a training wheel. People, again, I don't know where that idea came from. I don't know why so many people do that, but it is the wrong idea. and is not even going to give you a remote chance of maximizing that spell that, you know, right now and forever is always very important. Okay, I might have faded immediately when I saw that dog running at me.
2, 1.
And I think y'all had a problem with the birds here. Your ret paladin hit the birds. So your reaction time on those incorporeals is great. But when I saw this the first time through, it made me nervous because he's really close to those dogs. And the problem with mind controlling the incorporeals is they become friendly and they can aggro things like those hyenas and the boss. So it's really situational. But and I don't have a video of my own to post this week, but I actually started running Shackle and Shackle and Dominate Mind, and then situationally I can choose. You know, if we have a being pop up and he's nowhere near hostile mobs, Dominate Mind is perfect, but if he's too close to hostile mobs, you can reach for Shackle and you still have an option that doesn't turn him friendly. Okay, we have boss.
3, 2, 1. Spread.
Yeah, all those messages on the screen, really, you can turn those off. And when it comes to the bar timers, I think you can, on this boss at least, you can turn off all bar timers. There's really not a mechanic here that requires you to time your heals. It's more of just how well do you know the mechanics, how well can you dance, how well can you position. It's not about healing. Okay, let's see if we can count your torments here. Your mind bender is almost ready.
3,
It's 1 torment.
1.
2 torments. 3, 4. Okay, you got 4 of 7. And you definitely had an execute range there. Your thing lit up. So you got 4 of 7. You missed a lot of value. And if you replay that while your Mindbender was out, you were casting multiple flash heals. So just to make a point again, the flash healing aspect comes before the Shadow Covenant. The long atonements are 15 seconds. Our radiance is only 12, I believe. And just that little extra bit of time does it is an immense difference. And if you set your group with long atonements, at least the first like 60% of your Mindbender window, you don't have to do anything but DPS. You have the freedom to just do that. And then in your Shadow Covenant, you really only have time and want to allow time for 1 global of Radiance. You don't want to really ever be casting something, not a flash heal. Let's see what you do here. There is a War Scourge in the group. Let's see if you pick him out. I forget. Does he even get pulled? I don't know. Okay, you're on a Rothix, or whatever his name is. He's not the worst mob, but he's not the best mob. So you definitely needed to be on the War Scourge here with your Long Schism. And it looks like you've lost your Schism. And also food for thought, if you were running Holy Nova, which I recommend, that would have just been a major spam moment. But I'm going to pause just for a second. So food for thought, happy to help you with this off the books. But with Long Schism and the fact, like the nature of our spec, where we have to bounce around targets to snipe those execute ranges for our torments, it's really important that we find a way and have a way to seamlessly navigate back to our Schism target. Excuse me. And that is what focus targets are for. So I guess I'll just go ahead and flash my macro here on the screen for you. But with focus targets, I have a separate modified keybind for Mind Blast and Dark Reprimand or Penance, that when I press the separate modifier, it'll navigate back to my Schism and fire. I don't think it's necessary to do like a macro for every single spell. So I've just done it on 2 of my harder hitters that I definitely want on my Schism. That is my Mind Blast and Penance. And those are frequent enough. I think we can get away with only having 2 like focus attacks. And that is a great way to reset your target and back to your Schism. I don't think that was the last time too. I think maybe right ahead of us, there's a moment where your long Schism is out. And I don't know if it was for execute ranges or maybe you just lost it, but you navigate away from your Schism. And it's very black and white. If you're not attacking your Schism when it's out, you're not maximizing Schism, and you have a whole point invested into this long Schism. I love that talent, but it's not easy to maximize. Oh yeah, definitely bind your mount. I wouldn't click your mount. Okay, let's see how this goes, and I think I'm going to skip forward to boss. Okay, so we have a War Scourge here. Your Harsh Discipline looks ready. Your Mindbender is ready. Okay, and in here, right, so I can't see. One of these guys has more health than the other. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. So that War Scourge wasn't with the group. So schisming someone else is fine, I guess. Especially with Mindbender.
Range 5.
Oh yeah, you want to get those dispels off quickly. So I only learned that recently too, but you get that disease on you. The disease itself doesn't do anything, and I could be wrong here. If anyone knows better, correct me. But that disease targets you with another attack that kills you. Okay, so we have boss.
Watch your step.
This is another boss where, let me just pause real quick. We just want to run Mindbender nonstop. We want to pump damage. When it comes to his damaging attacks, our Mindbender isn't really what we reach for. We want to reach for Rapture and Barrier. I think on a couple of them, just naturally Shadow Covenant does line up, but we have to track his energy. So the reason I have a bar pop up center on my screen showing his energy is because I think it is valuable to have his energy, since it's so important to this fight, in a fixed location. Because, for example, let's say a totem pops up and you switch targets to the totem to kind of give some energy there. You're going to lose sight of his energy bar. That's why I think it's good to have it in a fixed location, not dependent on if you're targeting him or not, because this whole fight, its whole cadence operates on his energy bar. When he reaches 100 is when he does that like bomb attack. So I definitely think you should get my weak aura pack that shows his energy. It's my weak aura pack that I think is called Important Fears, but it also has boss energy bars for things like Underrot and This Place and whoever else has those. And then, yeah, let's just watch. So you're playing this little game on the rock. I don't think the mechanic is that hard where you can't just play it. I think it bites you in the butt. I think they've disabled all of these little hacks. I think you get hit. Okay, that was a good switch for the totem. Okay, so his bar is about 100% health. This is where you should already be rapturing. And preemptively rapturing is important. If you wait too long, your rapture will not be available for the next one. Yeah, so the way it crumbles now is you missed your rapture there, and you cast it too late, that by the time the next attack comes, your rapture won't be available. Also, it's one of those things on this fight. Yeah, so with your bigwigs, I really think you only need to track the totem. You don't need to track any other bar. We'll see his energy in the center. But he has that attack, the Decay Strike, that puts a heal absorb on him. I've already talked to you about this. It's a great place for barrier. But it's really important to see heal absorbs. Someone could argue on this fight in particular, the heal absorb is almost negligible. You don't really need to see it. And a lot of times your passive heals are enough to manage it. But heal absorbs are very important to see, just period, if you ask me. So bringing up that weak R that shows the heal absorb on the tank, I think it will really change your perspective in a lot of keys, and definitely seeing it is important. Okay, so he's about to pop off. This is an example where your Rapture was not ready in time because you cast it too late. A reactive Radiance is fine.
3, 2, 1.
Okay. So usually with these totems, I'll penance the boss to spread my dot. I'll give a star, a Holy Nova, and then it's really, really important on any boss where there's ads. It's really important to try and pick up executes on the ads. It is a lot of lost damage and healing if you're letting those executes go by. So yeah, I think you're doing a lot of things right here. I think that was probably at least an 85 or 90% parse, which is really great. And I hope in pointing out a couple of these areas where you might be having misses, I hope you can take that and find improvement and maybe some more fun with the spec and definitely more output. And even though a lot of our mechanics are about to change, I think this is a really good exercise in kind of fine-tuning the way you approach your spec. And I hope you can take these ideas into the future and be able to problem solve more efficiently as, you know, different rotations arise. So again, please everyone go check out my metafy.gg. I'm really excited to start teaching more. And until next time, Disc out.